Alan wanted me to kind of give an overview of the overpasses, the projects we've been involved with there with DOT. So these are the three main ones I'm going to talk about: Highway 93, Pequot Summit, Silver Zone, and SR 160. Just to provide a little bit of background, I'm sure many of you have seen this before, but really this started back in 2006 with discussions between NDOW and NDOT. It was a local collaboration out in Elko County. Area biologists working with their DOT collaborator. There was about 300 deer getting hit on the highway that we were estimating on I-80 and Highway 93 per year, 300. Had several meetings. A crossing structure was discussed at 10-mile location, and that was chosen due to the number of vehicle collisions that were there primarily and ease of construction. So that pass was completed in July of 2010. Cost $1.8 million. It was funded by Q1 monies and American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Just keep that figure in mind, $1.8 million. That might seem like a lot of money, but it's actually pretty cheap in today's standards. And you'll see why here in a little bit. Here's another expansion of that project. 2010, we put some underpasses on, completed the exclusionary fencing. That was about $2.2 million, federal highway safety funds, and we used some of our own funds, Fish and Wildlife funds, federal funds, to purchase the fencing material for that. And that really helped to get that project over the hump and actually kind of pave the way for more crossings on Pequot, that state contribution, showing that the Department of Wildlife is contributing financially, investing a lot of our own funds into that, providing safety for humans, but also safe passage for mule deer. Silver Zone, that was a project that NDOT was kind of already, they had some work going in that area already. It's farther east of Pequot as you get towards Wendover. $1.5 million for a double overpass that crosses an interstate. That is a bargain. Those were recession costs. The construction workers, the contractors were essentially begging for work at that time, is what I'm told by NDOT. That's one of the reasons it was that cheap. And you'll see when I talk about Pequot here in a minute, kind of some of the differences in costs. This is one more recently that was completed, SR 160. So this is between the highway between Las Vegas and Pahrump. The pink polygon there is a mule deer corridor that we've delineated. It does cross the 160 even before the pass was installed. But we were seeing a lot of collisions there on mule deer, bighorn sheep, and elk, as well as burros and other things like that. We worked with NDOT to identify this location. So that's right after that was constructed. Kind of a look from the bottom of it. For perspective, it's a really wide, for a culvert, it's really big and wide, which is ideal, especially for bighorn. I think that's Cody McKee standing there at the bottom of it. This is just kind of on the right, a look at the at grade. So if you're on the highway looking at just a little bit for perspective, you got the fencing funneling in there. So it's a real large opening. Which is important, as you're going to see here in a minute. So we've already been documenting mule deer use across this structure. We're working with Arizona Game and Fish. It's actually a really cool collaborative effort with them. They have a pretty big research branch in Arizona, and they got a lot of experience monitoring these things and researching them. They've done work for us on the Boulder City bypass too. They're working on monitoring that. So a couple mule deer bucks using it right away. We documented, well, they have documented through trail cameras, sheep, bighorn sheep using the crossing structure. The bars are the approaches and crosses. The darker is basically an animal approaches the structure, and whether they cross successfully is the lighter bars. So bighorn on the left, mule deer on the right. Interesting differences there. The peak usage seems to be in October for bighorn. Whereas for mule deer, it kind of peaks there in July. Not quite sure what's going on with the timing of that. Could be some just local inner movements from water. Maybe just post fawning season. for that peak for mule deer. But the bars definitely indicate successful, crossing. So that's when they come up to the crossing on the camera and they successfully cross. It's in the gray bar captured there. So other benefits to other wildlife, it's not just mule deer, although that was the highest collision for big game species. They've documented jackrabbits, bobcats, burrow, although this one was fairly interesting to me. There's actually there's been 7 approaches, but no successful crossings by burrows. They're the only ones who won't use those culverts, apparently. Coyotes, quite a few of those, gray fox, mountain lion. This figure here in the lower, let's see if my pointer works, lower center, that's a ringtail that they documented using that, a bobcat here, and obviously coyotes. And then probably the best success from my perspective so far has been bighorn, because we were, quite worried that maybe bighorn wouldn't use those crossing structures. They tend to not want to go into dark culverts, but this one being the aspect ratio wide and open and well lit. You can see here these mature rams using that thing, and also carnivores. We had mountain lions using it and coyotes. So that was a real positive success. And this is real preliminary stuff. This is stuff that we haven't, written it up in a formal report or published it or anything. This is just kind of raw data I'm showing you here, raw pictures. Pequot Summit, very successful project. You can see the cost difference there, $22 million for that structure right there. So that's more current. And that's not even today, 2023 costs, because construction costs, steel, concrete, everything is just like skyrocketing right now. So these things are getting costlier to build, but hugely successful. The map up there in the upper right is showing the migration corridor. The red colors are the more usage. These are the middle Pequot, where we have this crossing structure here. We've got some culverts. And then there's an overpass on the west side. A little bit less use on that west side, although a lot of that data was collected pre-construction. Whoops. And so I fully expect that as we collect more collar data, we're going to get more usage of those crossing structures in the future on the outsides. But that main corridor definitely goes through Pequot Summit. That's where they want to cross, and that's where they mainly do cross. So the question is, do they work? We worked with a UNR grad student who now works for DOT, Nova Simpson, started this as her master's in 2010. She documented 16,000 crossings. This is just on Highway 93 here during 4 migrations. A lot more use on the overpass than the underpass. That might have been just the site selection. That 10-mile overpass was kind of center right there on the main part of the migration, compared to we had underpasses, culverts on either side and at HD Summit. But deer collisions immediately started being reduced about 50% with each subsequent year. So this is work from her master's. The red bar or the red arrow there indicates when the crossing structures were kind of installed. These are the vehicle collisions, the number of mule deer documenting getting hit. One of the things that we found in this study is that the actual number of collisions are very much underrepresented of what's truly out there. That animal hit database is something that's collected by counties and sheriffs and state highway patrol that goes into a database. But that's only when people collide with a deer or something and report it to the sheriff's office, like they have usually a wreck or major damage to their vehicle. If they hit a deer and it runs off and it doesn't do much damage to their vehicle, it might not get reported. So they were actually out cruising the road collecting carcasses and comparing that, the number of carcasses to the database. And they estimated that at least 30%, I think it was 30 to 50% of the actual carcasses out there, they might be, 50 yards off the median or the side of the road that aren't getting reported by the sheriffs or the DOT road crews. So we published that work in the Journal of Wildlife Management. I think this was in 2016. The map kind of shows the location here on the 93 HD Summit area. So you have 10 Mile here with the green overpass and the yellow are the underpasses. This was Nova's work, but several collaborators from the department, Kelly Stewart at University of Nevada, myself, Mike Cox. Definitely want to give credit to Mike because he was really involved in this early on, going after some of those funds, helping DOT get federal highway funds, getting our own funds to use the match to get the funding for the fencing, instrumental in getting the collars out. That really helped us narrow down where to put them. And then Carrie, obviously, was a huge part of this. He's retired now, and Tony, of course, former director. This is some of the monitoring that we're doing currently on Pequot. We've documented vehicle collisions reduced by 80 to 90% just within this corridor, the Pequot corridor. Hugely successful. These panels, this is some work we're doing with USGS. We published this in Western Migrations, Volume 3. This is Highway 93 on the left, Pequot, and Silver Zone. So the dots indicate pre-construction mortalities, and the black dots are post-construction. So you can see the magnitude of the difference. You don't want to see black dots, but there are a few. And that's important because these things, when you put them in, they don't prevent every single mortality from occurring. They tend to get in around the outsides of the fences, and continual monitoring is important because we've actually had to extend the fencing on some of these. So the deer will learn pretty quickly they can go around the fence. They'll get trapped in the inside. There are jump outs built in to hopefully prevent that, but it does happen. Silver Zone, I'm not quite sure why. It just seems to be, although it's by and large a lot fewer black dots compared to the white ones, but there are still getting hit, especially on the outsides of that fence. But overall, like I said, really successful. Shows you the power of that GPS collar data, showing that corridor and documenting some of that usage. We're also using trail cameras to monitor usage of these. This is one, I think, from HD Summit. See if that actually works. So we use trail cameras. Get a lot of questions about the cattle panels. If deer will actually go through those. And you can see here the does are jumping over. Right there, fawn squirted through. They tend to like to go under. And so that's, those are to prevent, cattle and other things like horses from using them. They're accessible to cattle if need be, if it crosses a grazing allotment or they need to move their cows or whatever. We can open those up real easy, but that's to keep that corridor for the wildlife primarily. So back in 2018, there was a federal initiative, Secretarial Order 3362, signed by the Interior. That provided a framework for cooperation between local, state, and federal agencies. It provided funding and kind of a standard protocol for all the states. Each state was tasked with developing a plan to identify and prioritize migration corridors and winter ranges for big game species. We have developed 3 plans thus far, updated them. Not quite annually. We're working on 2023 right now. Our first action plan basically just said, okay, where are our priorities? Which herds? What data do we have that we can map and get them up to speed using kind of some of the latest science on this. 2019, basically we're looking at crucial habitat, which habitats within the corridors, where can we implement projects. 2020, 21. Identified some on-the-ground needs, fencing modifications. We also added a couple extra research projects here, including the horse mule deer competition stuff that you guys saw in May that Dr. Stoner presented on. And we're working on getting that published this year, hopefully, in peer review. And then our most recent one that we're working on, we're going to add 5 new corridors for mule deer and 3 pronghorn corridors, as well as summarizing some of the habitat successes and projects we've done within those corridors. So these were our first 3 corridors that we prioritized for mule deer. And there's actually 3 subherds, but the purple is Area 6. For those not familiar with this, but this is Elko. You have the Pequops, Ruby Mountains, and then these 3 herds within the Area 6 larger herd, which we defined as the Eisenhood Basin herd, the Sheep Creek herd, and the South Tuscarora herd. And actually, we're working on expanding that because, of course, some of these deer, that doesn't even capture all the variability. Some of these deer go up on the Wahi Desert. They migrate into Idaho on the Bruno, Jarbidge confluence and up into Wahi. So we're working to further kind of define that. And Pequop, we're expanding Pequop to include contact. And some of those deer also migrate much further north. And even the rubies, we've expanded collaring there to include a corridor between the East Humboldts and Spruce Mountain that crosses Highway 93 right here by Dry Valley Mountain. So we've been working to publish these with USGS. This was our first one, volume 1. There's an interactive map that you can access the data. You can download the data in ScienceBase. This is showing the mule deer herds, our priority mule deer herds. We added this pronghorn herd, the Sheldon. That was some work that the Sheldon actually did. And we just kind of worked with the USGS to get that remapped and published. As well as you can see, a little bit hard to read on this map, but 3 herds here right around Reno. So we've got the Truckee to Verdi, the Truckee Loyalton, we're calling it, pretty much Peterson Mountains into 021, right around Reno. And then the Carson River herd, interstate herd. So these are deer that summer in the Sierra, California. They winter in Nevada around Carson City. Some of them even go into the Pine Nut Mountains and even farther east into the Buckskin Mountains. We had a couple. So this is kind of a sneak preview. I'm not going to touch too much on this, but this is some stuff we're working on with a connectivity plan. And it's an online tool that we're working to develop. We've had a couple stakeholder meetings already. We planned some public meetings. What this is going to do is allow you or anybody to view and access this data, this corridor data. It is available already. Some of it is with USGS, but we don't have Nevada-specific layers to go with it. And so in this case, this is a tool that you can display the corridors. This is an example of the Pequops. And that underlying map is our eco-state map. I think Mark Freeze is going to talk a little bit more about some of this habitat mapping that we're doing, but essentially it allows you to evaluate what the condition of the vegetation is on the ground through time. In this case, we've got pretty good shrub integrity, a little bit of cheatgrass invasion there. The red and the brown is what you don't want to see, but this is actually really good compared to some of our other herds. There's other things about this tool. You can look at the number of fences they have to cross, the number of roads, linear miles that cross the corridor. And we'll be probably coming to you with an update on that in the future once we get this thing fully built out. So this is just kind of another way that we're looking at some of this data. The blue lines are that Area 6 deer herd. We call them the spaghetti lines. Those are just the lines connecting the dots. And the polygons are fires. So this is one of our herds that has just been, devastated by fires. This is just going back to, it shows back to the early 80s, really, in the yellow, and then the more recent stuff in red. But really, since 2017, 18 is when we've seen some of our significant fires occurring along the corridor, mostly winter range. You've got the Sheep Creek range. Summer range has been fairly intact, although the South Sugarloaf fire, which was 2018, I believe, actually burned up into some of the summer range. Ultimately, that summer range could be beneficial if, given it has a little bit higher moisture regime, and we'll see some productivity there. But that lower elevation stuff along Interstate 80 is it's a real challenge in terms of recovery and rehabilitation. I think Mark's going to chat a little bit more about that as well. You can see here in the middle, this one corridor, this is another area of concern for us. Some of these deer cross Interstate 80 right here at the Humboldt River near Dumphy. They winter in the Argenta Rim area, which has been burned, but quite a few, we see a few collisions along here. Those deer are forced to go under a bridge that's full of water in high flows, and that forces them to go up and over the highway, increasing their chance of getting hit on the road. There's also some fencing issues there. We're working with some of our partners there to get some of those issues straightened out.